It makes no difference what men think of presidential war. Presidential war endures, as well ask men what they think of stone. Presidential war was always here. Before man was, presidential war waited for him, the ultimate trade awaiting its ultimate practitioner. That is the way it was and will be, that way and not some other way. Trial of chance or trial of worth, all games aspire to the condition of presidential war, for here that which is wagered swallows up game, player, all. Presidential war is the ultimate game, because presidential war is at last a forcing of the unity of existence. Presidential war is God.
Presidential war. What is it good for intellectual stimulation? Say it again now. Presidential war. What is it good for presidential?
Hello and welcome to the Dead Presidents Podcast. I'm Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
And I'm James J. Hamilton.
And this is Presidential War, the season finale of Season 2 of our favorite card game. And we're doing things a little bit different here for this season finale.
Yep, another new variation, an epic variation. We laid out all 22 category cards, split up the deck, and each of us looked at all the cards we were dealt and allocated them among the 22 categories as we thought best fit.
That's it. So this should really prove an epic contest.
Yep, a lot of the categories here will have their top contenders.
That's right. So it should be.
And then some presidents will be unfortunately left out.
Well, yeah.
Because you can't compete in every category, but
that's
there
right.
will be some great competitions here.
Absolutely. So let's get down to it with our first category here, which is looks.
See who we go with. I went with Franklin Pierce.
And I went with John F. Kennedy.
Wow.
So we got two of our easily top fives here.
Yep.
You got the more antebellum, roguish handsomeness. Franklin Pierce with his dark curls.
Fabulous Frankie Pierce.
That's it. And then JFK is kind of your classic all-American boy.
Yep.
You get the Camelot imagery there. I think, obviously Jackie was helping out there, but JFK, despite medical conditions, stayed pretty darn fit.
Mm-hmm.
He had some serious back trouble and was plagued with headaches. But despite that, remained a pretty fit specimen. I mean,
Pierce, also a pretty strapping physique. These two may be each the handsomest president of their respective centuries.
That very well could be.
A clash of the centuries here.
There's no footage of Franklin Pierce shirtless at poolside like there is at JFK.
That's true.
Well, it's a good contest, but Franklin Pierce is generally considered to be the best looking president, I believe, in various lists.
Yeah.
He's always right up there, and right behind him is usually Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of comes down to personal preference, I suppose.
Yeah.
Who is objectively speaking the better looking man?
I don't know. I mean, I may be biased because it's my card, but I think Pierce is a little more handsome.
I'm gonna go ahead and agree.
JFK has the advantage of the telegenic era where the president was on TV and everyone looks at him.
Yep.
Whereas nobody got as much of a look at Franklin Pierce in the general population.
Yeah, so there's that.
He doesn't
the
have
allure of mystery.
Yeah. Pierce didn't have the cult of personality around his looks, but
right.
He was pretty damn handsome.
Yeah, and his wife would not have done him any favors.
No. He's carrying the looks in that marriage.
That's it. And Franklin Pierce going to take the first category.
Pierce triumphs.
That's it. Next up, we have who would win in a fight.
I went with Teddy Roosevelt.
And I went with the rail splitter himself,
Ouch.
Abraham Lincoln. And
Wow.
of course, this would be a great match.
Yeah.
I could hear it playing out in the, well, former PWF, current TWO right now. You know, you could visualize what an epic contest it would be between these two.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they probably might have gone head to head at some point in the couple presidential rumbles they competed in.
that's it. It would certainly be a war of attrition. Who's going to pass out first?
Both presidents known in real life for their boxing prowess, wrestling abilities.
Yeah.
TR infamously able to take a beating.
Yeah.
Lincoln probably be dishing one out.
Yeah, that's the thing.
He ultimately has the height and reach advantage here.
Yeah. And he's a good wrestler. If TR gets in close, which he'd kind of have to, he's in trouble. You know, Lincoln could tie him up in a rear naked choke and have him tapping out real fast.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking Lincoln.
Yeah, I'd probably have to give it to Lincoln, although this would be one of the most brutal brawls that any two presidents could have.
It could very well be.
And
It's a match for the ages.
yeah, they
Indeed.
haven't gone one-on-one in the PWF yet. They probably will someday, because they're a couple of the top contenders.
That's for sure. And speaking of top, as in top contenders, we're looking at best president overall here.
Yep.
So it's the tippy top of the presidency. And I went with Warren Harding. Just kidding. George Washington.
I went with James Buchanan.
Wow.
Not kidding.
Yeah. A
'Cause,
throwaway.
Yeah, well, I knew you had Lincoln and Washington in your hand, and
Yeah.
I had already allocated more of my better presidents.
That
to
could be
other
smart.
categories,
That could be
so
smart strategic play.
I figured I would have to throw that one away regardless.
In a way, I threw away my Washington card. I could have put anybody there and beat Buchanan.
Well,
So there you go. There's some
Perhaps.
strategy in this game of war. But as it is, Washington easily trouncing James Buchanan.
yeah. I don't think anyone would argue against that. Not even James Buchanan would have the gall to do
To
that.
claim that he was a better president than Washington.
No.
I bet he would say that his struggles were comparative, though. I
Yeah.
bet he'd be vain enough to claim that.
Yeah.
But
Say
no.
Washington, one of the handful of presidents that could outrank Buchanan
Yeah.
in his own mind.
Yeah, and that's going to move us on to most accomplished parents. Most accomplished parents.
I went with George W. Bush.
There you go. I went with Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor, of course, his father owned over 10,000 acres. He had been a Revolutionary War veteran, had seen his fair share of pretty important battles. Washington appointed him to a position after the war, pretty well to do. And his mother was pretty well educated for the time.
Yeah, I think
So not too
didn't-
shabby.
Didn't he win this category in
He
a
did.
recent episode of Presidential War?
Mhm.
Well, and then you got George W. Bush, whose father, George H.W. Bush, one of two presidents to have their father become president,
That's right.
and among a host of other high offices he held. And his mother, Barbara Bush, was, I believe, number 2 on our most accomplished presidential
Yeah.
moms episode. So,
Yeah, he
George
comes from really
W.
good stock.
has a 1-2 punch in terms of high accomplishment in his parents.
That's for sure.
Doesn't
yeah,
get
he's,
much higher than that.
No, he's going to take it.
George W.
Taking it over Zachary Taylor. And next up, we will have Most Devious. And I played Lyndon Johnson.
I went with William Henry Harrison.
Okay, so my argument with Johnson is, the political backslapping in his early days. There's stories of stuffing ballot boxes and whatnot, and there are conspiracy theories, these wild theories out there that Johnson may have had something to do with the deaths of John and Robert Kennedy.
Yeah, that would certainly make him probably by far the most devious ever.
Maybe Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Well, LBJ racking up a long potential hit list.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. Well, William Henry Harrison, I probably went with him not so much as president, but as in his earlier days as the ruthless executioner of Jefferson's Indian policy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that could certainly be called devious.
inch by inch taking the Northwest away from the Indians.
Yeah, I mean,
making a hero reputation for himself in the process.
that's right. And that's more, proven historical fact, whereas some of the stuff with Johnson is like, yeah, we're pretty sure there was like ballot box stuffing, but nobody's going to say like, yeah, Lyndon Johnson had all these people killed,
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah, we can't say for sure.
He was a coarse man, and he could be vulgar.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, sure, there was probably a little bit of deviousness behind his tactics, but I mean, I don't think it holds a candle to William Henry Harrison's tactics with the Native Americans.
Yeah, certainly from a Native American perspective, what was going on there was pretty devious.
Yeah.
Although American citizens would have thought it was great and totally above board.
Yeah. That's a tough one. I mean, because it's kind of two different kind of realms of deviousness.
Yeah.
To Harrison, that probably didn't seem devious at all. It was just winning. The only thing is, from the Native American perspective, it was like, wow, these guys are fucking assholes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. If I knew more about LBJ, I might have a better sense of his overall deviousness.
Well, I mean, he definitely wanted to get ahead politically. I don't think there's as much like just outright like just fact like Harrison was a dick to Native Americans. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of leaning towards him.
Yeah, I guess I agree. 'Cause Harrison did his thing while also remaining kind of like having his like morally upright reputation intact
Yeah.
with Americans, which I guess is pretty devious in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And he's not like Zachary Taylor. He wasn't ignorant to politics either. He knew what he was doing with his moves.
He was pretty savvy.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think we're going to give it to William Henry Harrison here in a hard-fought battle.
Yep.
And moving on, we have Best Businessman. Let's see who we have going at it here. We're going to have a frequent player in this card with Andy Johnson.
Well, I went with Benjamin Harrison.
There we go. Andy Johnson, of course, was apprenticed to a tailor and ran away, of course.
Yep.
But ended up with his own tailor business.
Mm-hmm.
And he, for the rest of his life, he made his own clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Fairly successful tailoring business that got him knowing a lot of people, and he was able to turn that into a successful political career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he really, he put together a little tailoring empire there and then turned into some real estate investments, diversified into a farm, and
Yeah.
he was pretty dang successful for a guy coming from as low as you can come.
Right.
Well, you got Benjamin Harrison, who obviously came from a more established family.
Yeah.
The afore discussed William Henry Harrison being his grandfather.
That's it.
Benjamin, his business was being a lawyer. He was pretty successful in that. I think it was, if I recall, during the Panic of 1873 years, doing a lot of legal business and bankruptcy and
Yeah.
foreclosure.
Right.
Little savvy there.
Yeah, solid lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Good practice.
Yep. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't think he really competes with Andy Johnson in terms of business acumen.
It's kind of, yeah, Johnson, more salt of the earth.
Mm,
And yeah, I mean,
Pretty
if
rags
the
to
story
riches.
ended there, it'd be pretty good for
Yeah.
Andy Johnson, you know?
yeah. Andy Johnson, a rags to riches tailor. Period.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Uh-huh.
Well,
What are you going to do?
he rose a little higher than his station.
Yeah, perhaps. And that's going to bring us to First Lady Looks. I went with John Tyler with the primary focus on Julia Gardner Tyler, who was quite the New York socialite belle.
Well, I was kind of. I chose this category towards the end when I was running out of cards. I chose Woodrow Wilson, a president who also had two first ladies.
Mhm.
Probably neither of them nearly as good looking as either of John Tyler's first ladies.
Yeah. Yeah, Letitia Christian also not bad looking.
Yeah.
Julia Gardner just had that youth and vivacity.
Yeah, Julia Gardner, definitely one of the top tier good looking first ladies.
Hmm.
Woodrow Wilson, Edith Wilson, known more for her substantive accomplishments.
Yeah.
Kind of another James Buchanan-like selection by me in this category.
Yeah.
But a chance to celebrate the good looks of Julia Tyler.
That's it. Tyler takes the hand. That's going to bring us to Best Statesman.
Best statesman, I went with Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Nice. I went with Thomas Jefferson.
Wow.
So this is a hell of a showdown here because
Yeah.
it's they pretty much exemplify it in two eras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Clash of Titans
Yeah,
here.
really, Jefferson, maybe the original statesman. Well, maybe that's taking it too far, but there's an argument there.
Yeah, he was certainly had a lot of experience in statesmanship. Served as minister to France and Secretary of State.
I think a lot of statesmanship had to be in mind when crafting the Declaration of Independence and
True.
some of these things that he was privy to. You know,
Yeah.
There's a lot has to be said for that, you know. And then, of course, when it got into the more political kind of argument between, you know, Jefferson and Hamilton, I don't think Jefferson fared quite as well as he did on the statesmanship line.
Yeah, that's true. Well, he ended up playing a longer game against Hamilton and won out in the end.
Yeah. I mean, it could also be said, though, that the Embargo Act is poor statesmanship.
Yeah.
So there is that argument there that kind of brings it down a little bit, because that could have been, if, you know, the statesman that Jefferson was, he should have been able to handle that, to resolve that. But he kind of had that, it was just, well, we're just not going to deal with anybody.
Yeah. And I mean, I've read that Jefferson himself had a pretty, like, hands-off approach on that's something
Yeah.
that Congress kind of cooked up, and he just, like, went along with, and then it was kind of, like, pretty lackluster in its enforcement.
Yeah.
It was just, yeah, kind of that's that, impasse where we're caught between Britain and France that we talked about during that whole era, where during that time of the embargo, like, the Jefferson administration had kind of run out of any other kind of option there that they were willing to do. So they were kind of going to take their toys and go home.
Yeah.
It didn't really work out.
As president, more of a presider, but I think my argument with the statesmanship would be more pre-presidential.
Yeah. That's true. I was thinking FDR maybe unrivaled as a statesman as president.
Yeah.
Certainly everything he did. I mean, even during the Depression, a lot of the things they tried during the Depression didn't really work, but he almost gets credit for doing a good job just because he was like a confident presence.
Well, yeah,
Certainly
I think he was inspiring
Yeah.
people. You know, he was reassuring. You know, the fireside chats and all that. He handled it really
Yeah.
well.
And then, yeah, World War II really, with me, the finest hour of
Yeah.
presidential statesmanship
Yeah.
right there, you know, with Churchill and Stalin, and really just rearranging the world,
Right.
winning the biggest war ever.
That's it.
Pretty solid, but hey, Jefferson had, you know, the pre-presidential statesmanship, Declaration of Independence, pretty world historic
Yeah.
event.
Yeah, something to be said for that.
Wow.
Kind of makes it a tough call.
Yeah, that's a really tough call. It's like a couple of these categories have been like apples and oranges, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. And they also they were each the kind of guy that for like generations after, they're the ones that like their party, you know, like we're the party of Jefferson, or
Yeah.
we're the classic like Roosevelt,
We're the New Deal Democrats,
Right.
you know.
and that everyone wants to be like them, carry their banner.
Yep. That's it. A really titanic matchup.
I don't know. I kind of want to give it to Jefferson.
Well, I'll agree with it. I mean, you know, overall, pretty historic. I mean, without which, you know, the nation wouldn't be what it is. You know, kind of just has to eke it out a little bit.
I think the Declaration of Independence will win it for Jefferson here.
That's it. A great work
Yep.
in not just American history. It's just a great work in history. Quite a battle there. And that's going to bring us to most accomplished vice president. I went with William McKinley.
I went with Andrew Jackson.
Okay, so William McKinley, we got Garrett Hobart, who was on our top 5 vice presidents list. He really did kind of totally shift the office from being one of just kind of ceremonial function to actually getting involved and doing some work. So, yeah, pretty important. And then, of course, his second vice president is Teddy Roosevelt, who was quite accomplished in his own right.
Yeah, this category technically limited to the accomplishments up through and including their vice presidencies. So TR was very accomplished up to that point.
That's right.
He was governor of New York, Spanish-American war hero.
New York police commissioner. He had done a lot of things. He was out
Yeah,
being a cowboy and working on the ranch.
yeah.
He did all kinds of stuff. He's writing books.
A lot of varied accomplishments. And then Garrett Hobart, who's a really successful businessman and corporate lawyer,
Yeah.
party insider, and then a very effective vice president. He is a 1-2 punch of
And pretty strong.
accomplished vice presidents, and then so does Andrew Jackson.
That's right. Let's go to the other hand here.
His first vice president, John C. Calhoun, who was on our top 5 worst vice presidents list.
Yeah.
He wasn't sitting on his hands as vice president
No.
beforehand.
No, that certainly can't be said.
He's, as a vice presidential accomplishment, almost taking down the president that he served under, and he had served under JQA as well, and
Yeah.
and was not helping JQA's cause as president either.
Right.
Yeah, John C. Calhoun, he had been Secretary of War, just a huge figure in South Carolina and Southern politics, one of the leaders of his region and his party.
Yeah, a polarizing figure in his own time.
Well, yeah, he was kind of trying to take down Jackson and Martin Van Buren,
Right.
falling just short, and then Van Buren then replacing him for Jackson's second term. You got Van Buren as a very accomplished vice president,
Absolutely.
architect of the Democratic Party,
Yep.
putting together the party that really became a party that we still have today.
Yeah.
Just a masterful politician,
Indeed.
getting the most important state in the Union at the time, New York, solidly in his control.
Yeah.
Secretary of State, and then closest advisor to Jackson, his hand-picked successor. His accomplishments putting him in to the point where he would just waltz right into the presidency.
Yeah. That's it.
One of the few vice presidents to do that.
Right. Yeah. MVB. Quite an important figure.
Yeah.
Another pretty good match.
Yeah, it's tough to say. I'd say out of these four vice presidents, MVP might be the top.
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of hard to reckon Calhoun, because
Yeah.
he was certainly very big and influential, but really not in a good way.
Yeah. But does it bring it down enough to give the hand to Jackson here? Or to give the hand to McKinley, rather. Yeah, I don't know if Calhoun would be enough to detract from MVB. It's a tough one, but really, I mean, in terms of American political history, Martin Van Buren is pretty integral.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that may be the more lasting kind of accomplishment.
Yeah.
That's making me lean towards Jackson here.
Yeah, I wonder what kind of, like how TR would have been remembered if he had never become president and not risen any higher than what he had done. Yeah. He was certainly a very interesting kind of Renaissance man.
Yeah.
I know that he reached his legendary status until he became president.
Right.
Whereas MVB did really important things even before he became president and really wasn't successful as president.
Right. That's it. Yeah, I think I'm leaning towards Jackson, just for the more historical importance of what Van Buren and Calhoun, to a certain extent, did.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'd agree with that. I mean, as much as you don't like what Calhoun did, he was kind of like, in a way, kind of the architect of what became the Confederacy, which was certainly bad, but it was also potent enough to, like, become its own country. And,
Yeah.
I mean, it was certainly huge.
Yeah, that's it.
It was an accomplishment, even if it was a negative one.
Jackson takes it.
Andy Jackson.
And next up, we're going to have Biggest Partier. And I went with Chet Arthur.
I went with Grover Cleveland.
Oh, man, these two would have had a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what a match.
Yeah. These two would be closing down whatever bar they were in.
That's for sure.
They were both known for that.
Yeah, I have a feeling that Cleveland has some more maybe shady partying references there, because Arthur was not known for that sort of thing.
Well, I don't know. That one book that I read had Arthur frequenting some establishments that were known for their quote-unquote waitresses that would kind of do whatever you wanted.
Wow.
And that Mrs. Arthur was not happy about his activities. It didn't go as far as to say that there was ever any actual question of infidelity, but he was staying out all night, and his wife wasn't happy about that.
Yeah.
And he was certainly around some things. But then, of course, Grover Cleveland fathering a bastard child.
Yeah.
Undeniable evidence of his participation.
Right. Yeah, maybe things got a little more wild with Grover Cleveland. Who knows?
Yeah, Cleveland, he remained a bachelor for much longer than is typical for presidents. I mean,
Yeah.
James Buchanan aside, presidents are getting married at an earlier age than Cleveland.
Yeah.
So he was obviously having a good time doing what he was doing, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It certainly involved drinking
Yeah, it
huge
certainly
amounts
involved
of beer.
beer and food, and yeah, I mean, he was having a good time. I think both these fellas were. I feel like the edge would go to Cleveland.
Yeah, I think Arthur, he kind of became, once he became politically established, he was kind of his partying was like staying out with all of his political connections
Yeah.
all night. Whereas Cleveland was partying just like as a younger man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's going to take
Then
it here.
settling down later in life.
Right. Settling down in the White House.
Yep.
But yeah, I think he's going to take this here.
Yeah, I'd give it to Cleveland.
And next up, we're going to have, who would you most like to meet?
I went with the great communicator, Ronald Reagan.
I went with, in my opinion, a great communicator, Harry Truman.
Nice.
I think spending time with Harry Truman would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
He'd have some great stories. He was an awesome storyteller. This is just the nice salt of the earth kind of. He's not going to be talking down to you. He's not going to be putting on an act. You know, he's
Wow.
going to be honest with you, maybe brutally honest.
Well,
But he's a cool dude, and I could get into the piano playing, probably have a little snort, and just talk.
mm-hmm.
Talking about World War One, and talking about the haberdashery business, and coming into politics, and how he felt about working with Tom Pendergast, and
Yeah.
What was it like being in the dark as vice president, and then finding out, like, hey, here's this thing, it's called an atom bomb.
Wow.
I don't know. Harry Truman, very interesting man.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like his blunt style, his way of speaking, just very real human being.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'd like to meet Harry Truman.
Yeah, he'd be pretty cool. I think Ronald Reagan would be pretty cool to meet too. Talk about old Hollywood.
Yeah, certainly.
Probably knows a lot of things about certain actors and actresses.
Mm-hmm.
Can talk about what it's like to be married to the throat goat, Nancy Reagan.
Yeah.
He'd certainly have some good stories and good jokes to tell. But
If you could remember him.
yeah, well,
That's a joke.
You get to meet him before he gets Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Both these presidents on our top 5 funniest presidents list
Right.
say that Reagan was a little higher ranked, but
Mm-hmm.
he probably had better joke writers
Yeah.
working on his team.
Yeah. I kind of feel like it's hard to say. Like, if you're just meeting them, I feel like his would be more kind of phony. It'd be kind of like, well, nice to meet you. All right. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
If you got to hang out with them for 20 minutes, like, that, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
It's tough to say. I mean, from a personal standpoint, I'd go Truman here. But-
Yeah, I think I might agree with that. They're both pretty cool, but yeah, Truman would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's just, I don't know, there's a lot that he would be able to talk about. Like, I'd be like, all right, so tell me about MacArthur.
Yeah.
There could be some, just, I don't know. I feel like he would be more fun.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is a time for choosing.
Yeah.
We'll choose to meet Harry Truman in this category.
There we go.
Close battle.
And that's going to bring us to Best Politician. And I chose the aforementioned Martin Van Buren.
I went with James Garfield.
There you go, Garfield. Hopping into politics fresh from the Civil War.
Yeah.
Well, during the war.
Mhm.
So it's still going on when he enters politics. And he's kind of just put forward, and they're like, yeah, that sounds great. And
Yeah,
so
I
he,
Yeah,
of course, as we know, like he wrote to Lincoln asking whether he should stay, and Lincoln said, your battle would be better fought on Capitol Hill, basically.
Yeah, they had plenty of generals, but not as many good politicians. I think Garfield was a pretty savvy politician.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, over the years, inched his way up in the Republican Party in Congress, became one of the most powerful congressmen, and then even potentially kind of savvy in his own presidential nomination,
Definitely.
where he's, a lot of people think he kind of placed himself as a dark horse candidate, while at the same time being able to say, no, don't vote for me.
Right. There's a little bit of perhaps orchestration going on there.
Orchestrated himself to be drafted without looking like he wanted it.
Right.
And then, as president, kind of had his little showdown with Roxo Conkling.
That's right.
And won that.
Yeah, and that,
Certainly his being
Conkling
shot by
was
an
looked
office
at-
seeker helped. But
well, yeah, but Conkling was looked at as totally unstoppable.
yeah.
And he wasn't going to get one over on James Garfield,
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said for Garfield from a political standpoint, from a politician perspective.
Yeah, one of the biggest, the biggest political issue of the day was civil service reform, and just within a few months of being president, he faced down the most powerful party boss and got Conkling to kind of blow himself up.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty incredible. But he's going up against Martin Van Buren, who
Yeah.
we've just talked about, the creator of the Democratic Party. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the little magician, the red fox of Kinderhook,
Yeah.
who rode to his objects with muffled oars.
Mm-hmm.
He's just the classic, consummate politician.
Yeah. Yeah, really the ultimate kind of a guy who's able to like not take a stance when he wants to avoid it. Really knowing how to work the back rooms,
Yeah.
unlike anyone else. Constructed really the first national party.
Right? And it kinda-
the thing that became ultimately such a problem by the time of Garfield with the party machines, where kind of conceived and really put together for the first time by Van Buren.
Right. Yeah, and when Van Buren does slip up politically, it's over Texas. That doesn't necessarily undo.
Yeah, that was
What he did.
Post presidential Van Buren was more taking moral stands rather than doing the politically expedient thing,
Right.
which I think you can give him credit for,
I agree.
because he already rose to the presidency pretty much purely on the basis of his political acumen.
Yeah. And an ever important figure in New York,
Mm-hmm.
which, as we've talked about many a time, was integral to the presidency. But, yep, MVB, gonna take it out
Yep.
for James Garfield. And that's gonna bring us to biggest election victories. I went with Ulysses S. Grant.
I went with James Monroe.
Ooh. So, Monroe, virtually unopposed when he ran for re-election.
His first election as president, 1816, going up against Rufus King, winning the Electoral College 183 to 34, winning 16 out of 19 states, a crushing victory,
Indeed.
and then running basically unopposed for his second term, winning all but one electoral vote,
Yeah.
which the one vote cast for John Quincy Adams by a guy who just didn't like James Monroe. But hey, what what president gets elected when there's only really one guy who doesn't
Right.
like you
Yeah.
enough to vote against you. Other than George Washington, he's pretty much like technically the biggest victories, although this is still the era before popular voting, and he's really kind of the beneficiary of the collapse of the Federalist Party,
Yeah.
really as a party, and he was the presider of the Jeffersonian Party in its final years of total victory before there was a realignment.
That's it. And on the other hand, you got Grant. In 1868, Grant is going to win the electoral votes of 26 states, finishing with a total of 214 over Horatio Seymour's 80. Grant capturing 53% of the popular vote to Seymour's 47%. And then in 1872, Grant's back and bigger, capturing this time 56% of the popular vote to Horace Greeley's 44%. And in the Electoral College, Grant 286, Greeley 0. Now, how can that be? Well, Horace Greeley died after the general election, but before the electoral votes were cast. So, the 66 votes that were expected to go to Greeley were divided up among other candidates. So, Grant, two pretty sound victories there.
Yeah.
But then, of course, he would try for a third term unsuccessfully,
True.
not be nominated.
Yeah.
But,
James Monroe was also kind of an unsuccessful candidate in 1808 for the Jeffersonian Party nomination when it was between him and Madison.
yeah.
That was really where that election was decided because Madison went on to crush the Federalist candidate.
Right.
Yeah, both of these men pretty successful electorally.
That's for sure.
They're, very different eras.
Yeah.
Yeah, Monroe, certainly by his second election, presiding over a country that was, kind of united in an unprecedented way, and that
Yeah.
there was, at least in a partisan standpoint.
Now,
there was-
had there been a popular vote with Monroe, I'm sure he still would have won.
yeah, I'm
Big
sure-
time.
yeah.
But, it's hard to say what kind of percentage it would have been,
Yeah. And then Grant running in a time that's almost unprecedentedly divided in a
Yeah.
very sharp way, but his half is more than half. And then, his second election running against Greeley, who was a liberal Republican. The liberal Republicans revolted from the Republican Party,
Mhm.
and he also got the Democrat nomination. And despite that opposition, Grant won more votes than he did the first time.
Yep. It's a good one.
Yeah, Monroe would have the bigger victories technically, mathematically,
Yeah.
but Grant also had huge victories when there was a much more formidable opposition. Work.
Yeah, well, because you got with Monroe, you're going into the quote unquote era of good feelings, and
Yeah.
I suppose that has to be said in terms of his, reelection.
Yeah, and also maybe worth mentioning Grant receiving large numbers of African American votes in the South
Yeah.
that later Republican presidents aren't going to get because of voter suppression, whereas Grant personally doing a lot of work to keep that that voting open for at least his term.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good matchup.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I'm leaning a particular way, to be honest. It's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm kind of leaning towards Grant just because of the opposition and, there is a popular vote, but it's a tough call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. This is another apples to oranges type category.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. Grant in 1880 could have been an interesting possibility. Because I think if he did get nominated, probably would have won.
Probably.
I mean, the popular vote, I'm pretty confident.
That was when Winfield Scott Hancock was a Democratic nominee.
Yep.
Yeah. 2 Union generals.
Yep, as it turned out to be anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, Grant certainly would have had the New York political machine working on his behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably would have won.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like in terms of popular victory, I think Grant.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'd probably give it to Grant. His election's more of kind of an overall accomplishment.
Yeah. I mean, electorally, that's hard to beat James Monroe, but Grant tore it up pretty hard, I mean, Horatio Seymour only got 80 electoral votes in the first running there, so, I mean, he pretty much killed it.
Mm-hmm.
It obviously having Greeley die before the electoral votes cast the second time round, I'm sure it would have been a little bit different, but it probably would have been similar to the first go with Seymour.
Even if Greeley got all 66
all 66
votes,
I don't think it would have been any better than Seymour. It would have, it certainly wouldn't have been, because Grant's popular vote went up a good bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's fair to give it to Grant.
Yeah, I guess it's an accomplishment to increase your margin when there's a lot of people have a lot of problems with your term, and not just unreconstructed Southerners.
Yeah.
So for being a president has some questionable things going on, to nevertheless win by a bigger margin, pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's it. And so Ulysses S. Grant, the victor of yet another hard-fought battle. And that's going to bring us to First Lady accomplishments.
I went with Hillary Rodham Clinton.
There you go. And I went with Lemonade Lucy Webb Hayes. Lucy Hayes, pretty awesome for her time.
Mm-hmm.
She was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton also pretty bad. I mean, bad.
Well, yeah, this is kind of an interesting comparison, because I think the Hayeses had one of the strongest, happiest marriages
I think so.
of the presidents, whereas the Clintons, not so much.
Yeah.
Lucy Hayes, known for kind of keeping a straight-laced, no-nonsense, no funny business going on in the White House kind of term.
Yeah.
Whereas Hillary, a lot of things going on. She's not able to control her husband at all.
Yeah.
Lucy Hayes, very active during the Civil War.
Yeah, it's like she did some pretty important shit.
Yeah, she was, in the Civil War camps, even though she was pregnant and giving birth and
Right.
kind of losing children in infancy at the time. She was still working as a war wife and working on behalf of the soldiers.
And there's a lot that could be said for that. Better educated for her time, I think a lot of the first ladies had a benefit of getting a little bit of a better education than a woman would at the time, but some of them obviously more stand out. Speaking of education, Hillary Clinton,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that any first lady was better educated than she.
I don't think so.
She was a
I
graduate
think she's
of
probably the best educated first lady.
distinguished graduate of Wellesley College and Yale Law School. Worked as a Senate staffer and then as a lawyer in the
Yeah.
Rose Law Firm, which withstood the inquiries of the Ken Starr investigation into
Yeah.
her activities there. Despite all the investigations, Hillary coming out relatively unscathed, and then
Well, that's it. I mean, there's not too much negative you could say about Lucy Hayes, unless, you're like a partier and you're like, ugh,
yeah,
we need to cut loose a little bit and lemonade Lucy over there,
hmm
keeping the party on the up and up. But whatever you want to say about Hillary Clinton, she's accomplished.
yeah. I mean, she's probably maybe the most polarizing first lady, but also undeniably, objectively, one of the most accomplished women in American history.
Absolutely.
As first lady, really taking on more than other first ladies had. Almost, I think I watched a documentary.
Yeah,
that
on a
she
political
did.
and personal level, obviously,
She took on kind of like spearheading the healthcare push, and then in her documentary, she even admitted that was probably a mistake for her to take that visible of a role because it kind of ended up backfiring, and she took on other things, but few first ladies could match her in terms of kind of hands-on policy
Yeah.
things.
And the first woman as a major presidential candidate.
Right. And
And-
no other first lady parlayed that into her own independent political career.
Yeah.
Senator, and then running for president a couple of times, winning the popular vote.
Yeah. That's right. So there you have it. I mean, whatever you want to say, negative. She is a historic woman.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and most accomplished. I would have to hand it to her over Lucy Hayes. I wouldn't knock Lucy Hayes.
hmm
She's a fine first lady.
Yeah.
But I
She
think
was-
Hillary Clinton's going to take the cake here
Yeah.
and eat it too.
hmm Yeah, Lucy Hayes, one of the, very accomplished in the mold of first ladies, but Hillary, a mold breaker.
Right. Well said. And that's going to bring us to nicest guy. Which of these is the nicer fella?
Well, I've got Jimmy Carter.
There we go. And I went with Warren Harding. Warren Harding, a really nice dude.
Yeah.
He loved everybody.
Well,
He
certainly-
said if he was a woman, he'd be pregnant all the time because he
Yeah.
just couldn't say no. He's going to be, he knew all kinds of musical instruments.
Mm,
He was a newspaper man. He's a friendly fella.
yeah.
He loves to get together, have a couple drinks, play poker,
Mm-hmm.
have some cigars.
Yeah, he's nice enough.
You're going to
to
have a real
bet
good
White
time.
House China.
Yeah, you're probably going to go out and see like a nice theater show, the chorus lines,
Yeah. And
oogling up them
take home
chorus
some of the
girls.
Chorus girls, yeah. Do
probably
something
have
in
a-
a closet, but then there's a dark side to Warren Harding's niceness, where if you're married to him, you may poison him to death, or at least some people will think you
That
have
doesn't make
reason to
him.
do so.
That doesn't make him any less nice.
Well,
That makes him too nice in the
Yeah.
eyes of his wife. He's a little bit too friendly.
yeah.
He was a friendly man. Warren Harding, maybe the second friendliest president.
Yeah.
Maybe. But after only Jimmy Carter.
Yeah. Jimmy Carter, genuinely nice.
Yeah.
He's,
He's nice to you without thinking he has something to gain for it.
still alive now, as of this recording.
Yeah, bless his heart.
It was just his, let's see, it would just have been his 98th birthday.
Wow.
He was born October 1st, 1924. Still going strong.
Happy birthday, Jimmy Carter. Belated, but
Well.
still. Best wishes from the Dead Presidents podcast. We know you are a longtime listener.
Well, we're recording this 2 weeks before it's released. Hopefully we don't have to edit it. If you're hearing this discussion, then Jimmy Carter lived 2 weeks more after we talked about it.
That's just it. And he's also going to win this hand.
Yeah, just a really
Yeah,
solidly nice guy.
we've talked about the humanitarian efforts that he's been involved in. Just a legitimately good human being.
Mhm.
He really totally goes against the political stereotype of the smarmy fucking rat. You know, that's
Well, he wasn't incredibly successful as president. Maybe he needed a harder edge, but regardless, he's certainly perhaps the nicest guy of all presidents.
absolutely. Absolutely. He's going to take it.
He's going to take it over Warren Harding.
And next up, we have pre-presidential accomplishments.
I went with James Madison.
Excellent. I tried with Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover, his humanitarian work. Speaking of humanitarian work, what Herbert Hoover did during World War I, my goodness. Phenomenal humanitarian efforts. Orchestrated by Herbert Hoover at the time. He's kind of another one that he should have been a great president.
Mm-hmm.
John Quincy Adams should have been a great president. You know,
Yeah.
Herbert Hoover, he really should have been a great president. But, I mean, at the same time, maybe that's just not where his particular skill set lay.
Yeah.
If you ask Calvin Coolidge, he offered bad advice and he just didn't grasp the...
Right, yeah, Hoover was Commerce Secretary.
Right.
Under Coolidge.
Yeah.
Coolidge saying he offered me lots of unsolicited advice, all of it bad.
Yeah.
I believe that was one of Coolidge's jokes in our top 5 funniest presidents.
That's right.
Sticking it to Hoover. Madison, of course, also serving in the cabinet. Jefferson, a little more in tune with his advice.
Yeah.
You're not going to find Jefferson saying Madison gave bad advice.
Well, I think you could... Pre-presidential accomplishments of James Madison. Good Lord. There's a laundry list.
Yeah, he's up there. He served in the Continental Congress, was instrumental in getting the Constitutional Convention called, and then as instrumental as anyone during it, earning him the #1 spot on our top 5 Constitutional Convention delegates.
Yeah, his work with the Federalist Papers.
Yep.
Ugh, man.
Known as Father of the Constitution.
Yeah,
And
a brilliant mind.
personally ramming it through the Virginia Ratifying Convention. And then one of, if not the leading member of Congress during the instrumental first Congress,
Right.
putting together the Bill of Rights among all the other kind of basic architecture of the federal government.
That's it.
Then alongside Jefferson, organizing kind of the first opposition party, turning it into a quote unquote wink wink, this is not a party, but it is a party.
Exactly.
That then becomes dominant, serving as Secretary of State during such events as the Louisiana Purchase.
and
Also, he was a true believer in the embargo, as aforementioned.
Right. That's what I was just going to say. But, yeah, I mean, my God. James Madison, one of the better cards for this particular hand. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hoover not too shabby, but
Yeah.
he's not going to take it against James Madison.
Yep. Hoover gonna get vacuumed up
That's it.
by Madison.
Alrighty. And that is going to bring us to, who would you rather have date your daughter? I went with the amicable and the intelligent and the handsome Millard Fillmore.
I went with the silent Cal Coolidge.
Ooh. Man, that's a good challenge. Calvin Coolidge has been victorious in this category before, and for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
He knows hard work. He appreciates labor and industry and business. He is fiscally responsible, perhaps to the point of appearing stingy.
Yeah.
So there is that. He's going to
You
be...
can be assured that your daughter will not want.
She's not going
She's
to...
not going to be given a bunch of flashy.
No,
stuff.
yeah, she's
She'll
not
have her
going
needs
to... She's
taken
not
care
going to
of.
want, but she's not going to be living it up with fancy gowns and frugal jewelry and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
You know, although Grace Coolidge, my God, you know?
She's pretty elegant.
So, yeah, maybe that's incorrect on my part because, well, Grace and Calvin, polar opposites, but if Calvin Coolidge showed up to date my daughter, I'd be really pleased
Yeah.
with her choice.
He's one of the nicer guys, maybe not quite on Jimmy Carter level, but pretty nice. One of the funniest presidents.
Got a great wit,
Yep.
a dry,
Seems-
sardonic sort of wit.
Pretty good father. We talked about how devastated he was by the death of Calvin Jr.
Yeah.
on our top 5 tragic presidential child deaths.
Yeah, he's a good man. And Fillmore, I mean, not anything too bad to say against him. Maybe a bit dull. But, well, that depends on the person, you know. I wouldn't be disappointed in my daughter if she brought him home and said, hey, I'm going on a date with Millard Fillmore. I'd be like, okay.
Yeah, Millard Fillmore. Pretty.
He's come up from it rough.
Yeah, he's a
You know,
pretty
he-
hard-working man, too.
And really, you know, pretty self-educated with the help of his wife. But, you know, in this case, he's working on self-educating himself, and it's going to be up to our daughter to help him.
Yeah, that's true. His wife helped him with his education a bit.
Yeah.
But I think our daughter should be up to the task.
Yeah.
But then of course, Fillmore getting remarried later in life after the death of his wife, marrying a rather wealthy woman and managing her finances. I don't know if our daughter is bringing a lot of money into the marriage, but if she was, you could trust Millard Fillmore to manage it.
Yeah.
2 fiscally responsible men here.
I'm thinking I'm leaning towards Coolidge.
Yeah, I'd probably lean toward Coolidge as well. Fillmore, maybe known a little bit more for his handsomeness. If we were Prince Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathern, obviously our daughter Victoria would be more excited
Yeah.
to see Millard Fillmore.
Mm-hmm.
But
That's for sure.
I think as fathers, we're not as hung up on looks as the young ladies would be in
Right.
choosing their beaux.
That's it. You don't want some freak, but, you know, that's not your first priority.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Calvin Coolidge
Yeah, I think
is
I'd
going
have
to take this.
Coolidge edging out Fillmore.
Indeed. And next up, we're going to have most accomplished children. And I went with George H.W. Bush.
Well, I went with John Adams.
Oh boy, here we are. The fathers of 2 U.S. presidents.
Yeah. Well, John Adams, also the father of alcoholic failure Charles Adams, who
Yeah.
died of alcohol-related, perhaps, illnesses. While
Well,
his father
I
was
mean,
president.
He was
George-
clearly the black sheep there.
Yeah.
You know, his Nabby was all right.
George H.W., father of Neil Bush, one of our top 5 embarrassing presidential brothers.
That's right.
And also, father of George W. was a little... went through a phase where he wasn't looking too good either, but...
Turned
obviously
out
reformed
Turned
himself.
out all right in the end. And then also Jeb Bush.
Yeah. He's both George W. and Jeb, both very,
2 governors,
very successful.
2 presidential candidates. One of them won.
Yeah. But then you got John Quincy Adams.
One of the most successful of presidential children, if not
Yeah.
the most successful presidential child.
Yeah, I'd say probably the most accomplished.
Yeah.
When you take his pre-presidential and post-presidential accomplishments, they are pretty formidable.
Indeed they are.
I don't know.
History making is John Quincy Adams. George W. Bush making history in a different manner.
Well, yeah. I mean, he was an important president as well. Kind of, he held his own.
He weren't no JQA, is what I'm saying.
No. Well, I mean, you could probably make arguments that they could be ranked similarly as president, but
Well,
George W., with little else to boast of outside of his presidency that could compare with much of the things that JQA had done.
Yeah, I think just, JQA as a mind was something to behold.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta give it to him.
Yeah, I'd agree.
John Adams taking it over George H.W. Bush.
Yep. 2 very successful American families. Of course, H.W. had already won by proxy when George W. was the winner in the most accomplished parents category.
That's right.
We're getting down to our final 4
That's it.
categories.
We got who would you pick first in flag football? And I knew the card that you had here.
Yeah,
So go ahead and say it.
Gerald Ford.
Well, I didn't want to just throw somebody away. That's not how I play this game, James. I'm not going
Yeah.
to stoop to throwing presidents to the wolves.
Yeah.
I wanted to make it a challenge. I went with Dwight Eisenhower,
Wow.
another good footballer.
Indeed.
His classic game. Remember the great Jim Thorpe?
Yep.
These guys would be the first 2 you'd pick. Absolutely.
Yep. That is true. Dwight Eisenhower playing for Army back before there was an NFL.
Yeah.
And I forget the name of Jim Thorpe's college, but they were the #1 football team in the world at the time. And, well, Dwight Eisenhower was pretty soundly beaten, but he put up a epic fight.
Sure.
Gerald Ford, All-American
Right.
for Michigan.
Go Blue.
And at the time when the NFL was a thing, but him turning down offers to play in the NFL.
That's it. Turning down both the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers and pursuing politics instead is Jerry Ford. I mean, I think they would both be pretty good at
Yeah.
flag football, but I mean, Jerry Ford goes beyond pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's actually like a great footballer,
Mm-hmm.
Dwight Eisenhower played football.
Yeah. Well, both of these men on our top 5 athletic presidents.
That's right.
Jerry-
Eisenhower also great golfer.
True.
Yeah. I hesitate to say that he was a great footballer, though.
Well, I mean,
He was good, obviously.
yeah. I mean, when you're talking about when your roster is the president's, then he's one of the top guys.
Yeah,
But
that's
Jerry
true.
Ford is a guy who was one of the top guys when your options were anyone else who was alive in America at the time.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, Jerry Ford gonna take this one, but a nice contest.
Yeah.
Putting Eisenhower down there with the Jim Thorpe connection.
Jerry Ford, the second best football player to beat Dwight Eisenhower behind Jim Thorpe.
That's it. But can Jerry Ford claim a hole-in-one?
Well, not that I know of.
Yeah, that's it. So there we have that. But in any event, he's taken the flag football category. Next up, we're going to go with Best Educated.
I went with William Howard Taft.
I went with Barack Obama.
Wow.
Who actually taught law at the University of Chicago, so that's pretty good.
Well, Taft, very educated. He graduated from Woodward High School in a college preparatory curriculum, and then went on to Yale University, class of 1878, where he performed well in class, joined the Skull and Bone Society, was elected junior class orator, and he later credited Yale for shaping much of his character. Won a math prize his junior year, composition prizes his senior year, graduated second of it in his class out of 132 students. Then went on to the University of Cincinnati Law School and was admitted to the bar in 1880.
Pretty impressive stuff. Barack Obama, Occidental College, 1971, transferred to Columbia, majoring in political science, receiving a bachelor's in 1983. And of course, 5 years later, 1988, entering Harvard Law School. He's going to become president of the Law Review. He's chosen over 18 other candidates. Oh, pretty impressive there. Not too shabby.
Yep.
Obama, of course, admitting himself that initially he's not taking his studies as seriously as he could, but once he transfers to Columbia, he kind of buckles down and picks it up and really finishes strong. Taft, I think, was pretty diligent the entirety of his education. I have a feeling if Taft and Obama took a quiz, if they were quizzed on law, I think Taft would win.
Yeah, I think so. Taft's law abilities taking him all the way to Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Although Barack Obama, the Supreme Court has changed a lot.
Sure.
Now,
that's the thing with the
did-
quiz thing. It'd have to be the law up to a certain point. They understand two different types of law.
I was going to say the Supreme Court has changed a lot, but Barack Obama's the kind of guy who you could see being appointed to the Supreme Court now as a post-president
Actually, yeah.
if the Supreme Court were different. I
Yeah.
that kind of thing is just not done anymore, but if it were, he would be the kind of guy who would be eligible for that.
Sure.
And if he were, you'd think he would probably be up to the task.
Oh,
certainly.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, both of these guys pretty much about as well educated as you can get. Yale, really, the tip-top kind of institution.
Well, yeah,
Skull
you're
and
talking
Bones,
Yale and
classic.
Harvard,
Yeah, the classic, paths to power. Columbia for Obama, also one of the biggest names. University of Cincinnati Law School, not known as an elite institution today. I don't know what it was like at the time, or that actually law school wasn't as big of a deal as it is now. They both, Yeah, it's hard to say because they were both about as well educated as you can get.
Right. I think maybe I was leaning towards Taft because I think he took it like as serious the whole time, whereas Obama kind of to begin with kind of living a little bit loose, kind of having fun, and then really buckling down and really hardcore applying himself and like rising really well. Almost a Franklin Pierce scenario.
Yeah.
Not quite, but you know.
Yeah, Obama admitting to like inhaling some substances during those years. I don't think Taft was inhaling anything other than like a hoagie.
Food. Yeah.
Yeah, if anything, I'd want to say the tiebreaker here being the Skull and Bones Society for Taft.
Yeah.
Although you might kind of credit that to his kind of family connections, being the son of a cabinet member.
Right. Old Alphonse Taft.
Yep. One of our top 5 most accomplished presidential dads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was going to make sure that his kids got the best education they could. I mean, he wasn't playing around.
But I'm sure that...
Obama managed to get a great education, you know, kind of in spite of not having the familial kind of grounding that Taft enjoyed.
I mean, he came from, I guess, a broken home, you could say, but both of his parents very well educated.
Indeed.
Yeah, and Taft, even though he came from a pretty prominent family, he was certainly making his own way on his own merit.
That's it.
Nobody was handing him anything. Yeah, I might give a slight edge to Taft here.
Yeah. I'd concede that.
I don't want to get into like a Yale versus Harvard thing, but
Right.
I feel like Yale might be slightly more elitist than Harvard, actually.
Yeah. Well, that being said, we are now looking at post-presidential accomplishments.
Well, I think I know who you were going with here, and I tried to get someone who might beat him.
Well, okay. You probably guessed right. I went with first term Grover Cleveland.
Yep.
Of course, post-presidential accomplishment, becoming president again.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. Other than that, And I mean, his second term wasn't even terribly great,
No.
you know.
Well, I went with John Quincy Adams.
Okay, yeah, there's a solid argument there. Absolutely. The only dim spot of JQA's life was his presidency. Pre-presidential, pretty much unsurpassed. Post-presidential, pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean,
He gets back into the House, and he is a force.
yeah. First term Cleveland, yeah, he's obviously kind of an anomaly in this category.
Right.
I don't know, as far as traditional post-presidencies go, I don't know if you can beat JQA. You got Taft, of course, who became Chief Justice.
Right.
John Quincy Adams' service in the House, really pretty legendary.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Kind of the stance he took on slavery and on the gag rule against
His role in the
discussing
Amistad
slavery.
case.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
incredible.
At a time when, before abolitionism became like a national cause, he was an abolitionist before it was
Yeah.
cool. He was the most prominent abolitionist in the country, really.
Yeah.
And
From a
although
political
in the
standpoint, yeah. I mean, he's
dropping
not
dead on the
dropping
floor.
it in the papers, you know.
end, yeah.
So the abolitionists that you really heard about were the newspaper men.
Right.
But from a political standpoint, JQA is really like the initial torchbearer there. Yeah, I actually would like to give it to him over Grover Cleveland here. Because, yeah, Grover Cleveland got elected president again, and of course that's a big accomplishment, but
Yeah.
it's also what's the right word? It is an accomplishment that didn't merit anything. You know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, his second presidency wasn't that great. You could say that outside forces conspired against it, but also you could also argue that the same forces kind of got him elected president the second time.
Yeah.
That it wasn't necessarily anything particularly great that he was doing, other than he was just still the most prominent Democrat.
And he was super popular. Obviously, he won the popular vote despite losing the election to Benjamin Harrison. So, I mean, he was a popular president.
Yeah, it was at the time the parties were so like evenly kind of back and forth at the time, that just, you know, obviously after his first term he got beat, and then 4 years later his party was back ready to be back on top again.
Yeah.
And he was the most available man, which is still huge because more than a handful of presidents have tried to get
That's
a
it.
non-consecutive term, and none of them have done it yet.
That's it. Yeah, I think it's fair to say JQA wins this easily.
Yeah, I think that's
His
What do you-
post-presidential accomplishments are more important,
yeah,
you know.
probably more. Yeah, more to be proud of.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and JQA able to take his accomplishments all the way to the brink of the grave, dropping dead on the floor of the House practically.
Yeah.
Dropping dead and then dying.
Yeah, opposing,
in the Capitol.
voicing no to a proposed bill, and then passing out at his desk and dying in
The Speaker's
the
office.
Speaker's office.
Yep, standing
Just-
up against the Mexican-American War to
Yep.
the end because he saw it as a pro-slavery measure, which it ended up causing a lot of sectional divide
It surely did.
right thereafter. Who knows what would have happened in the coming years if someone like JQA was around, but
Yeah.
obviously after 1850s, the old statesmen, Clay, Calhoun, Webster were all
they're
on their
all-
way out.
Yep, they're all dying off.
A new generation couldn't hold it together.
No.
JQA with a post-presidential career for the ages.
Indeed. That's like, he's great pre and post presidency. It's just his presidency came in under a cloud and couldn't do anything that he proposed. He had some great ideas. It's a sad thing. But that's going to bring us down to, so, you know, speaking of sad, we're down to the last hand.
Our final category, most underrated, and we will consult our C-SPAN amalgamation of historians rankings to see who is underrated.
I went with Richard Nixon.
I went with James K. Polk.
Okay. So let's see here. We got Richard Nixon at number 28.
Polk at number 14.
Okay. I'm going to say right off the bat, that's low for both of them.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think they're probably both. Well, they're both underrated. Nixon is a tricky. Dick is a tricky guy to rate.
Yeah.
Because if you look at his presidency, aside from Watergate, he was very accomplished. And I think we've said it before, had the Watergate burglars not been caught, Nixon probably goes down. He's probably rated above where Polk is on here. Would probably be a top 15, if not top 10 president if he had escaped the stain of Watergate.
Yeah, perhaps. And then with Polk, I mean, Here at the Dead Presidents Podcast, Polk's considered an easy top 5. Now, I think what these historians are basing their ranking off of is probably the fact that the territory that Polk got pretty much led straight to the Civil War.
Yeah, and while we just talked about, some guys like John Quincy Adams maybe saw how that was going to be a problem. Really, does anyone today not want to have all that territory as part of the United States, though?
I doubt it.
Pretty monumental.
I don't know that anybody in the United States would want to just give that territory back.
No. And yeah, as we discussed in the Polk episode, not a lot of Mexicans living there. It was pretty sparsely populated. Of course, not counting the Native Americans, which neither Mexico nor the United States counted the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah. And while, that's certainly where it went, Polk didn't cause that. And if you have to judge Polk, you'd think he's more of the Jacksonian type where the Union is above sectional interests.
Yeah. I'm just looking at this, though. You got Jimmy Carter, Ulysses S. Grant, John Quincy Adams, all above Nixon.
Yeah.
Not to mention the ones that are above Polk, like Obama, Wilson, LBJ, Reagan, JFK. I mean, it's questionable. We've always said it's a kind of an odd list. But who would be more underrated on here? Probably Polk. Because he is probably top 10.
Yeah.
Because you got to look at it from what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, there was a substantial minority of people who were against expansion, but it was kind of, as much as Southerners may have wanted expansion for Southern reasons, Northerners were against it for Northern reasons. It was very sectional, but if you can put that aside, it's pretty great to have all that territory. And fewer presidents have been as successful as Polk in accomplishing
what they set out to do.
Yeah, there's only really a handful who you can say are that accomplished.
Right. Micromanaging everything and, he's pretty much running the whole show.
Yeah.
To the detriment of his health. And, Nixon, I think, pretty much just gets the Watergate treatment. And therefore, that's pretty much, it's, I think that shouldn't be the only thing he's remembered for.
Right.
Obviously you have to hold that against him.
Yeah.
But,
I think some people, a lot of people would rank him lower.
I'm sure.
Some people put him in like the bottom handful of presidents because of it. And he definitely doesn't deserve that. 28, that might be a little low. And there are certainly a handful of people ranked above him who probably should not be. But still, and as much as lots of presidents and politicians have probably done things similar to the Watergate cover-up, they didn't get caught. And that's the thing we say about Nixon is, if you're going to do that kind of shit, you can't get caught. And he got caught. So if it was shady morally, it was also inept.
Yeah.
Which is not a good combination.
No, it's not.
For a president to have to resign the office is
pretty disgraceful.
Yeah, it's pretty disgraceful. Like, other than a couple presidents like Buchanan, there's no, kind of single event that takes someone down as much as that.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
So, yeah, he might be slightly underrated on here, and he certainly had a lot of solid accomplishments on one side of his scale. Yeah, I think we here at the Dead Presidents podcast are pretty big Pulp fans, and
Yeah, I
consider
mean,
him top 5 or top 10, if not in the running for top 5.
right. Yeah, I would say he's going to take it here.
Yeah, he's pretty one of the quintessential underrated presidents.
He's the most underrated president,
Yeah.
I think.
I
you
mean,
know?
he's certainly, as far as people we'd consider probably a great president that few people in the general public have even heard of,
Right.
much less would consider a good
I
president.
think he's the least known great president,
Yeah,
and certainly the most underrated.
yeah.
Just going to hand it to him. And that will bring us to the card count. Well, I finished with 16.
And I had 28.
A decisive victory for James J. Hamilton in quite a historic matchup
Yep,
of presidential war.
a clash of titans.
Indeed, a lot of them.
Most of the
Real close battles.
some of the top contenders in each category, and some very epic battles here.
Absolutely. And that's what makes the listener, as always, the real winner here.
Yep.
It's been a fun and exciting season of presidential war. We
Yeah,
hope
we've explored many different varieties of ways to play the game. This
that's it.
a very exciting one.
That's right. And had many an interesting discussion,
Yep.
which is the real goal. And that's what it's all about there.
Fitting conclusion
That's
to
just
this
it.
season of presidential war.
That's just it. But as we stated in the opening quote, war doesn't really go away. And of course, President's Day next year, we'll be back with more presidential war as we continue our journey through the lives of all of our nation's chief executives.
Until then, I've been James J. Hamilton.
And I'm Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
Thanks for listening.